What is up, Viego mans? This is a very important video that I know a lot of you have been waiting for. This is going to be my itemization and runes guide for Viego on patch 14.10, or better known as the start of Split 2. A ton of items got changed, and Viego is now in an interesting spot where a lot of us don't really know what to build, and because of that, I think it's affecting his win rate and a lot of people's ability to perform well on Viego, including me. But I've been hard at work trying to figure out how to build Viego, what runes to take, his playstyle, everything like that. I've been talking to other Viego mans, high-low Viego mans, looking at their op.ggs, trying things myself, and I think I finally have figured out the ideal way to play Viego on this patch, and I will share it all with you. Also, before I get started, it needs to be known, I do have my own Blade of the Ruined King, and I think that alone makes me qualified to talk about Viego builds. So with that being said, let's get started. First things first, let's get into the obviously very important thing, whether we go Blade of the Ruined King first or Kraken Slayer first. I know some people have been flirting with the idea of Collector first. Not a fan of that. Will not recommend it. It's decent, but it's either between Blade of the Ruined King and Kraken Slayer. Now, what I will say about Blade of the Ruined King is that it actually is better in jungle this patch than last patch. I know a lot of people are saying that they miss the current health passive, but in general, Blade of the Ruined King is just straight up better for junglers now than it was before because of a couple things. The fact that it has 15 more AD is actually going to give you more damage during your jungle clear than previously, where Blade of the Ruined King's damage relied on the passive, whereas now it relies on the stat stick mostly. And because of that, your Q will do more damage, and just your damage all across the board will do more damage to jungle camps, which is huge. The attack speed being increased is another element of that. The lifesteal is nice, but not the biggest deal. And also, as you can see here, the passive missed edge monster damage cap is increased. Even though Bork's passive did get nerfed, this passive monster damage increase makes him better at clearing the jungle with Bork throughout. So obviously I like Bork a lot, and that is going to come into play with the builds in the future. However, I will also say that I think Blade of the Ruined King is more of a situational item rather than a core item, and I will obviously explain that later. But first, I very obviously need to talk about Kraken Slayer, because this is the most controversial item on the current patch. A lot of people don't know whether this item is shit now, if it's better, if it's weaker, if it's even. So I'm going to tell you everything you need to know about Kraken Slayer. Kraken Slayer has had its build path changed, one of the biggest controversial things about Kraken Slayer, on top of the fact that they increased it by 100 gold and removed the crit off of it. So all those things together probably make it sound like the item's worse. However, they replaced the crit with 7% movement speed, which as a jungler is a very big deal, on top of the fact that they increased the AD by 10 and the attack speed by 5%. The other main thing is that they changed the passive to now have a missing health execute damage component, which means that the sustained damage that you would do on like a healthy target, such as like a tank or whatever, will be reduced. However, when you calculate the missing health damage, you will do more damage to someone who is under 30% health than you did previously. So that is an important thing to keep into consideration, that Kraken Slayer is actually better at finishing targets now than it previously was. And because of that, Kraken Slayer is actually arguably better now than it was before, just in a different way. And I think that this is the thing that is confusing the most people about Kraken Slayer, is they feel like they miss the crit and Kraken just does less damage. However, think about the way that you play Viego. Viego does not want to be initiating fights. He wants to be waiting patiently in his mist for someone to get low, and then he goes in to kill them so that he can get his possession, and then the resets start going through, and that is how you play Viego. So if Viego has increased movement speed, on top of the fact that he now has an execute damage component in Kraken Slayer, it allows you to just get onto a target and finish them off quickly. Pause. It allows you to finish them off quickly, which then in turn gets you the possession, and then obviously once you get resets, that's where Viego shines. So, spoiler alert, I still think that Kraken is the best first item on Viego in 80% of games. So the main thing that I'll say is that Kraken Slayer would probably have a higher win rate if you guys actually knew how to build the item. So a lot of people will talk about the components of Kraken Slayer and how they're just really shit now compared to Noon Quiver. And no matter how you shake it, yes, the components are worse now that it doesn't have Noon Quiver. However, I think the mistake that a lot of people are making is they're building Hearthbound Axe way too early. Hearthbound Axe should be the last thing that you buy, because Hearthbound Axe is one of the worst gold inefficient items I have seen in my life. Mages get a 900 gold item that is basically a mini Leandri's that is actually just one of the most gold efficient items to ever exist in League of Legends, and we get Noon Quiver, the actual like greatest thing since sliced bread, replaced by Hearthbound Axe, which gives you 20 AD and 20% attack speed for 1300 gold, and it is just awful. Trust me, you do not want to be building it. I think a lot of Viego mains are building Hearthbound Axe because it's 1300 gold and Noon Quiver was 1300 gold, so that's what they're doing. But what you want to do is you want to go Recurve Bow as your first priority, and then Rectrix, however you pronounce that, as your secondary item, and then Hearthbound Axe last. The best thing you can do is to build Recurve Bow and then a Longsword, or Recurve Bow and then Rectrix if you can. And if you build those two items first, your early game actually isn't as bad as it probably has been for a lot of you. The build path of Kraken Slayer isn't actually that bad if you're prioritizing the right items. That's my little tidbit about Kraken. I think it actually is good, and the build path isn't that bad, but you just have to reframe your mind on how you look at Kraken Slayer and also how you build it. So with that being said, let's actually get into a more complete version of the builds. So the complete item build is going to be something similar to this. Now, this may look very standard to you, and that's because it is. And a lot of Viego mains have been trying to experiment a lot, and I think that's been affecting a lot of your win rates and whatnot, including me. I've been trying Kraken into Bork, I've been trying Kraken into Titanic Hydra, into Crit, into all these different things, and ultimately, the thing is that All Reliable comes out on top. Now, it's not exactly the same, but there are basically two different variations of this build that I want you guys to run. Kraken to Sunder Sky is very viable. I know Sunder Sky got nerfed and a lot of us were down on it, but a lot of Viego mains, including almost every single high-elo Viego main, is going Kraken into Sunder Sky. However, a good portion of them are also going Kraken into Triforce. Another key thing to note is if you look at the statistics, Kraken does actually have a high win rate, very close to Bork as your first item here, but if you scroll down to item 2, the most popular is Sundered Sky, and then Bork, and then Triforce. So Triforce is the third most built, but it sells 14,000 games played, which is quite a lot, and actually does have a 1% higher win rate than Sundered Sky. So I think Triforce is being incredibly underutilized, despite the fact that it has a very good win rate with a high play rate. Sunder Sky is still the most popular though. It was the most popular last patch, so it makes sense that it's going to remain the most popular this patch. I know that this is a lot of numbers to just look at, so I'll just explain it to you. Basically, Sundered Sky is your good standard second item because it gives you a lot of HP plus effective HP and a decent amount of burst, so it's a great all-around item like it always has been, and it will probably be your most consistent option. If you're not really that strong, I would go Sundered Sky. If you're kind of even or you have a lot of damage on your team, I would go Sundered Sky. Triforce is my preference because I'm someone who likes to build a little bit more damage, and Triforce does have more damage. It's a bit less tankiness, however it's more damage, and because of that, hopefully more carry potential. I actually really like Kraken into Triforce, but Kraken into Sundered Sky or Triforce are your go-tos. If you don't know which of the two to build, like it's too hard for you to decide situationally, I would just go Triforce in my opinion, but either works, and they're both great situationally. Another thing that's very situational is Kraken first or Bork first. Like I said before, Blade of the Ruined King is very, very close to Kraken Slayer. It's also very, very close to me because it's right behind me, but that's besides the point. It is very, very close to Kraken Slayer as a first item, and that's why it's become a situational item, where before I would say you would never build Blade of the Ruined King, but now you do. Now, when the enemy team has 2 or 3 tanks, or just has like a really beefy team, like people that are going to build a bunch of HP, I would say that Blade of the Ruined King is actually better. I think you should just straight up go Blade of the Ruined King when you're versus high HP teams, and the build pretty much remains the exact same, besides you just swap one for the other. I don't think that Kraken Slayer is bad versus tanks. In fact, I think it does perfectly fine, because ultimately you're going to be trying to go for targets that are low HP. However, Blade of the Ruined King just slightly edges out Kraken versus tanky teams, and because of the fact that it's just a better first item now on Viego Jungle than it was previously, I think Blade of the Ruined King is a great first item versus those teams, so that is something to consider. Another thing is Lord Dominik's. Now, Lord Dominik's got a change. This is something I want to talk about, where they gave it 5% more armor pen, they increased the crit like they did to a lot of crit items, from 20% to 25%. They increased the AD, but then they removed the increased damage based on target's max health advantage. Now, I will say this is actually a buff for Viego, because most of Viego's builds included HP items like Sundered Sky, Sterix, Triforce. It included a lot of these builds, which meant that even though Lord Dominik's was statistically pretty good on Viego, you couldn't build it as much because you didn't want to lose out on the Giant Slayer passive, because you would be building HP, so you wouldn't get that passive. But now they've completely removed it and then buffed all the other aspects of Lord Dominik's, which means that Lord Dominik's is now a fantastic armor pen item, even if you're building HP items. So items like Triforce or Sundered Sky or whatever, Lord Dominik's is still great with those items, like it wasn't before, as a third item. So I actually have been going in a lot of my games, I've been going Lord Dominik's third. Sometimes I go Mortal Reminder third if they have a lot of healing as well. I think that going Kraken into Triforce into Lord Dominik's is probably the best carry build I've experienced. But you guys need to remember that Viego is a situational item buyer. If you can't think about your situational items on Viego, you are going to be in trouble. So let's just say Kraken into Triforce is standard. Like I said, Kraken into Sundered Sky is good, Bork into Sundered Sky is good, stuff like that. But after your second item, everything is situational. If they have a bunch of tanks and you're fed, Lord Dominik's is great. If they have a bunch of magic damage and you're snowballing, and they also have a lot of CC, Wit's End is great. Gives you the magic damage, gives you the tenacity, gives you some carry potential. If they have a bunch of magic damage burst, not a lot of CC, you can go Maw if you want something more defensive. If they're heavy AD, you can go Death Stance. You have to be able to situationally pick your items, but these are all options. So Sterix is decent third as well. If they have like a hybrid bit of damage and a lot of CC, you can still go Sterix. It's not bad at all. I think a lot of people get too caught up in finding the perfect items for Viego. One of the most beautiful things about Viego is that he has a wide range of item choices that you can pick from. The other thing I'll talk about is boots. Steel Caps received a pretty decent nerf, so unless the enemy team is full AD, I would actually suggest to go Merc Treads or Swifties. If Merc Treads aren't good and Steel Caps aren't great, Swifties are actually a very, very underrated item. I actually love going Swifties so much. I am a huge Swiftie salesman. I would say that I used to build Steel Caps about half the time. Now I'm building them about 10 to 20% of the time. Ultimately speaking, I think Steel Caps are just worse. Merc Treads remain pretty unchanged, and Swifties have always been underrated. So that's another aspect of things. But if you guys have any questions about situational items, feel free to ask me in the comments. I know that I left it kind of open-ended. I gave you some examples, but ultimately you have to be able to adapt. So if you have questions, feel free to ask me about situational items in the comments, and I will do my best to respond to you. Now, before I wrap up the video, I have to talk about runes. So let me talk about Press the Attack real quick. Press the Attack is actually a much better rune now than it was previously. Before, Press the Attack was kind of commonly accepted as just the better early game rune, but doesn't scale as well as Conquer and is less consistent, so Conquer is just straight up better. However, now they made it so Press the Attack persists throughout combat after you proc it, and it's just an 8% damage amp. And because of that, Press the Attack is just really, really good, because you can keep Press the Attack going through possessions where you previously weren't able to do that. And because of that, Press the Attack is actually a much more viable option. Another thing is, remember when I was talking about Kraken Slayer, how Kraken Slayer has the execute component. So if you play patiently in fights, you're going in for basically the kill, and Kraken Slayer is better at that. Well, now Press the Attack also very much synergizes with that playstyle even more than it did previously, because you're looking for just a quick burst to try to get your reset to then go from there to snowball. In my opinion, I'm very, very high on Press the Attack right now. And with that being said, I also think that Conqueror is amazing. I think that if you're going to go Blade of the Ruined King, you should probably go Conqueror, because you're probably going a more sustained build versus more tanks. I think if the enemy team is squishy and you're planning on going Kraken, that Press the Attack is better. Press the Attack is probably an underrated keystone that you should go to more if you are going Kraken Slayer. But a lot of people are wondering why Viego's like lower win rate this patch. Is Viego just worse? Is Kraken Slayer worse? You need to remember the thing that I talked about earlier, that Viego is a very situational builder. And because of that, a lot of people have tested all different kinds of things. A lot of people have been going Kraken Bork. A lot of people have been going things that aren't super optimal. And because of that, his win rate has taken a dip. And once things start to stabilize and people start going the builds that make a lot more sense for Viego, such as the ones I recommended to you, that his win rate will actually go back to what it was before patch 14.10, and he will be strong. Also, mages and ADCs are probably going to get some nerfs, which means that Viego will, you know, come out even more on top. So it's still a good time to be a Viego main. Hope this video helps explain a lot of the things that you guys might be confused about. If you are confused about anything, like I said, please make sure to comment. I'm trying to get to 100,000 subscribers. We're very, very close. And if you enjoyed this video and you like Viego content, make sure to subscribe. Make sure to like the video, share it with your friends that are Viego mains. Comment what you thought about the video, and I hope you guys are doing amazing. Good luck on your rank journeys, and I will see you guys on my journey to Challenger. Thanks for watching, guys. 07, and I will see you all in the next video.